Welcome to Anthropologically Yours. I'm Rashmi, and today we are talking to the gentleman about the attention affair inside the private hunger of modern men. You are starving, gentlemen, and not for bread. You move through days filled with meetings, chaos, people, deadlines, and the polite applause of functionality, and yet an emptiness. And emptiness is always there, quietly underneath. It is not lust, not even ambition. It's a faint ache to be regarded, properly regarded once more. In a civilization that celebrates bluntness, you find yourselves craving refinement, and in the middle of abundance, you long for admiration that feels earned rather than automated. I have watched you in cafes, in meeting rooms, in those half-lit lounges where business mingles with boredom sometimes. There is a particular stillness that follows the modern man. His posture says composure, but his eyes look as though they are waiting for permission to rest. He carries the exhaustion of someone who must appear decisive even when he is uncertain. The world has made you fluent in confidence, but mute in tenderness. You know how to close a deal. You know how to please your client, how to measure a tone, how to lead that team, how to be eloquent in that team meeting, how to stand slightly to the left of triumph. What you have forgotten is how to be seen without performing the part. It is a curious century. We call ourselves liberated, of course. Yet we are bound by the same ancient instinct, the wish to be admired by a discerning gaze. Once a man's reputation lived in the stories others told about him. Now it lives in the light of a screen. The applause is louder but shorter. The modern man measures his worth by attention, and attention, like any volatile currency, devalues with use. I think often of the last gentleman I met, the real sort, not the caricature. He entered into your surrounding quietly, as if sound itself had agreed to behave. He spoke a little, but every word landed as though edited by conscience. He wore civility the ways other wear fragrance that's perceptible, never pronounced. When he listened, people straightened their sentences. There was no affection, no moral performance, only precision under pressure. Elegance in his company felt like luxury. Well, and sometimes more like discipline. The last gentleman is an endangered species in this age of performative honesty. His manners, once admired, are now mistaken for insincerity. We have begun to confuse noise with truth and candor with courage. Yet the world still hungers for the grace he represented. The ability to be powerful without aggression, articulate without arrogance, and attentive without a strategy. He was a proof that refinement is not repression. It is a mastery of impulse. You, men, have inherited his ghost, the last gentleman's ghost. You keep him alive every time you lower your voice, when anger would be easier. Every time you polish a sentence before releasing it into the air. You may not wear hats or carry walking sticks or wear those long, stylish coats, but When you open a door, when you remember a name, when you stand still while another speaks, you practice an endangered elegance. And though the culture mocks you for it, calling it obsolete, somewhere deep down you know that composure is the last seduction that's left in this century I speak today. I once overheard two young men in a London bar. One said, almost apologetically, "I think I am too polite to be interesting." The other replied, "Then stop being polite." And I thought how perfectly that exchange captured the tragedy of our age. We have persuaded men that bluntness is authenticity, that charm is deceit, that to be careful is to be false. The result is a generation of men shouting their truths into the void and wondering why no one is listening. The truth is that attention, when demanded, has no flavor. It must be invited through grace. There is a difference between being noticed and being seen. The first is a reflex of curiosity, and the second, an act of respect. The gentleman understood this distinction instinctively. He did not chase admiration, he earned it by precision. In conversation, he waited a breath longer than comfort required. He earned it. In affection, he gave without the vocabulary of demand. The woman who met him remembered not his clothes, but the quiet certainty of his presence, just like I do. He made the world slower for a moment, and that, in an age of acceleration, is the rarest form of power. Modern men often tell me they are tired of proving competence, tired of explaining decency, tired of the paradox of wanting connection while being punished for vulnerability. I tell them that exhaustion is not weakness, it is evidence of conscience. You are trying to remain civil in a civilization that rewards a spectacle. You are trying to stay faithful to the world while the crowd prefers confession. You are, in short, still trying to be the gentleman in a world that has forgotten what the word meant. Perhaps this is why attention feels erotic now, because true attention, steady, unhurried, specific, is a relic of respect. When someone looks at you with genuine curiosity, it recalls a more ordered era, when to be well-mannered was to be sensual. The gaze of admiration, when it lingers without hunger, becomes a kind of moral compliment. You miss that. All men do. I'm sure the women do too. I miss that. Not the chase, but the recognition. The assurance that your restraint still communicates meaning. In the next part of this reflection, I will move from recognition to the cost of visibility, how the attention you crave becomes the performance you despise, and how, even now, the last gentleman may yet survive as the quiet rebellion of grace. The difficulty, of course, is that attention has become a trade. What was once a gesture of intimacy is now a unit of measurement. You are rewarded not for substance, but for display, for showing off, and the transaction is endless. Every photograph, every post on social media, every polite smile across a conference room becomes another entry in the great ledger of notice. This irony is exquisite. You labor to be visible, and visibility erodes the very mastery that once made you interesting. I have seen men shrink beneath the fluorescence of constant exposure. Their words grow shorter, their laughter louder, their gestures rehearsed. They mistake projection for presence. And yet, every so often a trace of the older manner returns. A pause before speaking, a glance that lands softly rather than scans. It reminds one of a time when communication required courage, when a letter was an act of faith and conversation a craft. The last gentleman knew this. He understood that brevity is not silence, it is being chosen as the selection. His sentences were cut on the bias like a good cloth. A friend once told me that his greatest fear was not failure but redundancy. To become a man the world no longer reacts to. That is the quiet terror behind so much modern male restlessness. Trust me, they are also restless. You are told to be transparent, yet the moment you reveal feeling, the world files you as weak. You are told to lead, yet every gesture of authority is audited for offense. And so you polish yourselves into visibility. And then you prefer to be invisible. The gentleman's coat has become a camouflage. Elegance, properly understood, is not a repression. It should be the rhythm of life. It is the grace of proportion, the ability to sense when a word, a touch, or a silence will suffice. The men who still practice this do not belong to any century. They are citizens of composure in a culture addicted to the confession. They offer a rare pleasure, discretion. They know the most seductive quality in the world is the absence of need. I remember one evening in New Delhi, the evening that smells faintly of cigars and rain. A man at the next table lifted his glass to his companion not as toast but as a question mark. He did not interrupt her, he simply marked her sentence with an acknowledgement. It was nothing and everything. The waiter noticed it, I noticed it, and for a second the whole bar adjusted its posture. This is refinement, influence without insistence. Yet refinement now survives only in fragments. You see it in the man who still writes by hand, in the colleague who chooses understatement over self-promotion, in the father who answers questions without patience instead of performance. These small gestures of grace are acts of resistance. They insist that civilization is not noise but calibration. Many of you are frightened that gentleness has no market value. You measure your worth in data, but it should be in dignity. But let me assure you, the world still hungers for men who are exact without cruelty, confident without any show-off, intelligent without an exhibition. The last gentleman is not a ghost from a drawing room age. He is the man who remembers proportion in a season of extremes. That is today, unfortunately. He still holds the door, literally and metaphorically, not to dominate, but to create that pause which allows you to think. That pause is civilization itself. There will always be those who mistake your restraint for weakness. Let them be. The louder eras pass. Poise endures. You may lose the race for attention, but you will keep something rarer, and that is presence. And presence, once cultivated, cannot be taken away. It is the authority that makes others lower their voices when you are around. That, gentlemen, is power refined to its purest state. So, what finally are you hungry for? Perhaps it is not love or conquest at all. Perhaps it is the restoration of grace, the right to move through the world without explanation. You wish to be recognized not for the spectacle, but for steadiness, for the way you hold your line when the world blurs out. And though civilization will continue to shout its instructions, some part of you will keep choosing proportion over noise, craft over confession, courtesy over chaos. That choice will not make you famous, it will definitely make you remembered. And who wants to be famous now? Everybody is famous, isn't it? Everybody knows everybody. And when the day ends and the crowd recedes, imagine yourself once more as the last gentleman. Jacket folded, voice measured, eyes unhurried. The world may call you old-fashioned. It does so because it secretly misses your kind. Elegance was never a costume, I think. It was a conscience made visible. So, my dear gentlemen, stay hungry, but choose your diet. Do not feed on applause. It digests poorly. Feed instead on precision, on the clean satisfaction of a task done well, a word chosen justly, a silence kept intact. The attention you will receive from that is not the noisy kind. It is the lasting kind. And that is exactly what the world needs today. Because everyone around you is noisy. You're still allowed to be gentle, to be exact, to be proud. The world may not always reward that, but somewhere, someone will notice the man beneath the noise, and that, gentlemen, will be enough. And so, when we speak of men today, these men of quiet exhaustion, of immaculate composure, of late night scrolling and private collapse, we are not speaking of weakness. We are speaking of their hunger. Not the hunger of conquest, definitely not. This is the hunger of recognition, to be seen without having to perform, to be understood without having to explain, to be admired not for achievement, but for the presence to be felt. It is the most invisible need of our time, this longing to matter quietly. So if you are listening tonight, perhaps alone, perhaps scrolling through a feed of louder lives, pause. There is someone somewhere who would choose your silence over anyone's applause. Someone who knows that attention, when freely given, is not a transaction. It is simply grace. And if you are that man, tired, unthanked, constantly useful, remember this: charm may open doors, but dignity keeps them open. The world may never admit it, but your gentleness is still a kind of rebellion that the world desperately needs today, among all the noise, among all the chaos. This was the Attention Affair. You have been listening to Anthropologically Yours. I'm Rashmi, and until next time, stay elegant, stay classy, stay observant, and never apologize for wanting to be seen. Bye-bye.